morning, my dear students, guests, faculty members, and I welcome Professor Milando, and I'm really thankful to Professor Milando for accepting the invitation from Office of Doctoral Studies and deliver a talk on very crucial issues, where one side we are struggling with China, other side we are struggling with Pakistan, other side we are struggling with Nepal. Definitely, it's a crucial issue and time when we are supposed to understand and we are supposed to think that how India and its international corporations is required post-COVID. It's a very budding issue, very interesting topic which Professor Milando is going to deliver today from the portal of Office of Doctoral Studies. That is, title of his discussion webinar is India and International Cooperation post-COVID. Uh, Professor Milando is a learned speaker and professor. He doesn't require any sort of introduction, but still, I would like to give a brief intro of Professor Milando. Professor Milando he has almost more than 27 years of research and teaching experience. He has published so many literature books, numerous research papers, articles in India and abroad. So Milando is expert in the area of international trade and the finance and environmental economics and Indian economics, development economic, uh, entrepreneurship development studies. He has also delivered lecture there in entrepreneurship, EDI, Gandhinagar, Los Angeles, IONS, Indiana University. Lot of research which Professor Chakrabarti has done is related to the real life situation. Professor Chakrabarti has excessively experienced profession in the area of the policy and the development practices. Professor Chakrabarti is also delivered talk and visited several countries. He is also working as a consultant for UNDP and IFD has worked at the British Council and uh, he has also contributed in DESI, that is no executive director in Development Evaluation Society of India, and is also a member. So we are thankful to Professor Chakrabarti to accept our offer and speak on the platform and enlighten the PhD scholars specifically from across the JGU. Sir, they will be very happy to hear your views, to know what is the situation, and definitely it is going to give them a light to think and align their research problem and even their thought process in the current direction. Professor, I would like to hand over this platform to you along with students and guests. Kindly start your discussion or presentation. I have given you full rights as a presenter. If you would like to share the screen, if you would like to have some presentation, even you can share it out. Professor, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Pandey, for giving me this opportunity to interact with my colleagues, with the doctoral students of Jindal. And I also find some of my own colleagues and some guests are there to participate in this discussion. I would rather prefer not to have a monologue. I would try to finish my presentation in the shortest possible period of time, and then I would invite questions and comments from the participants, because I don't believe that a webinar or a seminar like this is not meant to flow out knowledge from my side to the other side, but I also believe that it should help me in developing and enhancing my own knowledge base. So I have not come here to deliver what I know, but I have come here to add to what I know and get necessary inputs and relevant inputs from the participants in this discussion. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I would like to make a PowerPoint presentation, which I will put up on the screen. But before I do that, I will just make two caveats. So far as the whole issue regarding the pandemic is concerned, we have to keep in mind that we are in a complete state of flux. We really don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. The level of uncertainty is very high. So whatever I'll be presenting will have an element of conjecture and will have an element of pious wishes, peaceful, that I wish something would happen, and from the perspective and context of the fact that the nothing final has been said yet about what's going to happen in the future. As you might have seen, there was a report in the Indian Journal of Medical Research today, where the epidemiologists have clearly said that all the economic models that were used to predict what's going to happen in the context of COVID in India all came out to be wrong. So, making wrong conclusions, arriving at conclusions which may not be held tenable tomorrow is quite likely. Even that is true in my case and the way I am going to make my presentation. So I would like to make this point very clear, because one point has to be kept in mind, that we are not in a position to say the final words about what's going to happen in the future. So keeping that in mind, I would like to make a presentation, and if the participants want, I am even ready to share it with you after the presentation is over.
Sure, sure.
Can you see the screen?
We can see your MS Team screen, Professor.
I Just a minute. I wanted to share my presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, this is why we are so. I don't know what's happening. Just a minute. We are so unprofessional in using Zoom and other.
If you click on share,
Yes, yes.
so it
Can
will
you see it
ask
now?
you. Yes.
Is it
Yes.
visible now?
Yeah, visible. Kindly make it full screen presentation.
Yes, yes, I am doing that. I hope it
Yes,
is
Professor.
completely.
Yes, yes.
It
Very
is
nice. Yes.
visible on the full screen.
Yes.
So, what if you have a look at the title of my presentation? I am really worried about the term, but which I think is the most important term. I am really worried about the term post, because although we claim to be rational, we claim to be knowing about our future very well. The future is not really known. So, but I will try to give a very brief idea about what I think, I conjecture about what's going to happen in the future. So this is just the backdrop. I am not going to sort of elaborate on it, that it started, and India has also started responding to the need of the global situation, global population. I would, although even though we are expected to discuss more on the modes of cooperation post-COVID, I would also like to throw some light on the present state of cooperation that India has initiated after the beginning of the outbreak of COVID-19. So initially, I would spend a little bit of time to give you an idea about the present state of cooperation that India has engaged in, and then we'll go for what can be done post COVID. So this is a very sort of wide angle view of India's present state of cooperation. India has been exporting medicines to different countries. If you have a look at the left hand side of my left hand side, you will find that about a huge amount of HCQ, hydroxychloroquine, and paracetamol tablets have been exported to about 60 or around 60 countries across the globe. On the other hand, India has provided medicines as gift to 26 countries across the globe. So there are humanitarian aid also given to a number of countries across the globe. But if you want to have a rather disaggregated perspective of what India has been doing right now, India has been playing a very important role even at this juncture in helping other developing countries to augment their capacity and giving access to the growth of human capital in their respective countries. India has been following a program called ITEC, International Training and Economic Cooperation, Technical and Economic Cooperation, from 1964. And for the last year, this year, we are not in a position to provide training by calling participants from all across the world to come to India and attend programs. Instead of that, we have gone for what is known as EITech network. And many webinars and training programs have been held to train healthcare professionals in various aspects of pandemic management. We have done courses on prevention and management guidelines vis-a-vis the pandemic, especially for African countries. There were initiatives at the SARC level. Video conferencing have been held for health professionals. WhatsApp contact group of doctors have been created to facilitate communication on patient management and testing. Information exchange platform named Coinex have been developed. The SARC Disaster Management Center has been set up with the assistance from MEA. Medical assistance team also went to different parts of the world, mainly in Mauritius and Comoros, and then rapid response teams consisting of doctors, nurses, and paramedics have been sent to different countries, developing countries in the world. Under a situation of this pandemic, initially there was a situation where India controlled their exports of medicines and medical devices to a number of to outside world, but gradually the restrictions have been reduced, and yesterday it was decided that the restrictions have been removed altogether. So we have helped countries like Serbia. Even we help countries like USA in terms of providing millions of tablets of hydroxychloroquine. About 445 million tablets of hydroxychloroquine was exported to 60 countries, and 619 million tablets of paracetamol were also exported. We also exported latex surgical gloves, PPEs, and other medical devices. And there is another component of India's support, which is in terms of grants and aid. Grants and aid may be considered into two components, one being the financial aid, where we sent emergency funds, we provided donations of medicines, and on the other hand, we provided humanitarian aid in terms of medical equipment and medical devices. So India and other G20 countries pledged to infuse over $5 trillion into the global economy to take care of the COVID situation right now. India also took an initiative to create a $10 million voluntary emergency fund to be used by the SARC nations. And it has made a commitment of 17 crore of medical aids, including antibiotics and protective gears and testing kits to our immediate neighbors. And the medical assistance are like this, that there were 21 countries where deliveries of HCQ was made. Medical assistance in the form of medicines and equipment were provided to many countries like Madagascar, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Armenia, Jamaica, Uzbekistan, Malta, Myanmar, Laos, and Comoros. Packets packets of medicines to 25 countries were dispatched. Latin American countries received special attention with medical supplies with countries like Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. Then there was a mission Sagar, which where Indian naval ship Keshari sailed to Maldives, Mauritius, Madagascar, and other Indian Ocean island countries, carrying on board two medical assistance teams, related essential medicines and food items. Operation Sanjeevani was delivered to Maldives, delivered uh, 6.2 tons of medicines and hospital supplies and other consumables. There were emergency evacuations, and there may be a wrong impression that emergency evacuations were only meant for Indians staying abroad. But when Indians staying abroad were evacuated, they also took care of foreign nationals from other countries. They were also evacuated from several parts of the world, and they include, I am not going into the number, but a lot of people, lot of citizens from a number of countries were evacuated during this process. So if you have a look at India's cooperation in the context of the COVID pandemic, you will find that they all conform to the fundamental basis for India's understanding of South-South cooperation, which is called the Development Compact. India believes that South-South cooperation and the associated idea of Development Compact means a situation where the developing countries can be helped in 5 different ways. They can be helped in terms of their capacity building. They can be helped in terms of sharing of technology. They can be helped in terms of providing access to the external trade market. They can be provided support in terms of providing loans and also grants. Grants are both in terms of financial resources and humanitarian support. But how the way it is considered to be different from the model followed by the traditional donors in international development cooperation is the fact that India does not just believe in giving some financial resources and does not believe that flow of financial resources are enough to take care of the development issues of a country. And India's support to southern countries is in terms of a very balanced mix of these 5 components together. So it's just not just grants and loans, but they are intermixed with efforts at capacity building, technology sharing, and access to the international trade market. And I am not going into the detail. If it is required, when we will be getting into a discussion mode, I can elaborate on these ideas a little more. But the point that I am trying to make, that if you have a look at what has India done so far, you will find that most of the efforts that India has done so far are in terms of component number 1, capacity building, component number 3, trade, and component number 5, grants. So these are the 3 components of development compact that we have been taking care of even at the time of the pandemic that is running through the global world today. And if there is already an argument that if India can come out with some vaccines and with some medicinal innovations, then those can also be shared without any IPR with the rest of the world. and that will take care of the second component of technology sharing as well. Now, with this background, I don't mind if there is any question that you may like, the audience may like to raise, or I can go through the next part and I can combine the questions later. What do you say, Professor Pandey?
Uh, it's up to you, Professor. This topic is quite interesting, and I'm sure that people would like to, all audience would like to ask question. So we welcome question from the side of audience. If you have any question with Professor, definitely you can ask right now. We can start a Q&A, and it's an interactive session. So if you have any question, definitely we should ask to Professor. He is ready to go for the Q&A mode of presentation.
And then after we can clarify the situation, present way of India's cooperation right now, then only we can go for the post-COVID situation,
Sure,
which is
definitely.
so that is how I want to divide the whole thing. Is there any question, or I can move forward?
Any question?
Yes.
Let me see. Let me check it out. Not yet anyone have asked.
Okay. Then let me continue, and we'll ask for questions later. So
Sure.
now the point is that what's going to happen when this pandemic is taken care of and the so-called curve of fatality and curve of infection is flattened. We assume that, well, it will happen pretty soon, and what will be the situation and what sort of cooperation will be required and will be necessary. So this is the potential scenario post-COVID, and which I would like you to appreciate that which is quite scary. Recent estimates say in June 10 by OECD, there would be in the first half of 2020 an almost 13% decline in global GDP. So there is a huge threat to disruptions in the growth of the economic process, and there will be contraction, and no country in the world will be spared from this threat of contraction. India has already started facing it. All the big countries, all the rich countries, and even the poorer countries will all face a huge disruption in global growth. And OECD also is not very sure that the situation will be picking up very soon. And they are not very sure as to what's going to happen in the second half of 2020. That will all depend on how the pandemic progresses or sort of goes through the life of the humanity in the coming few months. And just as there will be a disruption in global growth, there is also a chance of reduction in global trade and investment. As per a study by WTO, it is estimated that in 2020, the world merchandise trade is set to go down by between 13 and 32% in 2020. And it is expected that there would be a recovery in 2021, but there is a caveat. There is a question of uncertainty that this will depend entirely on the duration of the outbreak. If the pandemic goes on for some more time, then the situation in 2021 may not also be that rosy as it is expected today. So WTO provides two estimates. One is called Goods Trade Barometer and the other one is called Services Trade Barometer. With 100 as the benchmark, in May 2020, the trade barometer stood at 87.6. That means around 12.4% decline from the benchmark level. The services trade barometer as on March 11, 2020 went down to 96.8 from 98.4 recorded in last September. One point must be made very clear that the trade barometers, if you have a look at it, will show that the situation in the global trade is not that it began only after the outbreak of the pandemic. The situation was already in a little precarious condition and it has blown up further because of the pandemic per se. The UNCTAD came out with the World Investment Report just a few days back, and it is estimated that the global FDI will be declining by 40% in 2020. And the idea is that by 2021, it will decline by another 5 to 10% with a possibility of recovery from 2022. But again, I must repeat the sentences that I have been arguing right from the beginning, that everything will depend as to when and how the curve is flattened. If the curve is not flattened, then this process will go on. So the 2 points that I am trying to make before I go to the next slide is to repeat that there will be disruptions in global trade, meaning global product, and there will be disruptions in global investment and global growth. So the economic situation in post-COVID period is not being seen to be very rosy, and the challenges and struggles for future will be very, I would say, prominent.
Professor,
Yes.
what you think about the leadership role? No, we have arrived once again at the boundaries of the human race, collective knowledge, and it's sobering to be reminded that what we do not know is much greater than what we know, what we do know about ourselves, the world we are living in it. My query here is, what type of role in this crisis or after this crisis or during this crisis a leadership role is required? The fact that there is no end in sight to the COVID-19 crisis does not prevent us from making prognosis of what post-COVID-19 world may look like. The pandemic has added a heft of argument of foreign policies analysts across the entire spectrum of strategic thinking, from nationalist and anti-globalist to advocating more robust multinationalism and the leadership role for India in mobilizing international cooperation. So what you believe, what is your comment on this, Professor?
Yes, I hope I will be given to finish my presentation, because that is exactly what I am going to do. Thank you for your interruption, but let me move on. There is rise in unemployment. There is an impending debt crisis, because leadership role has to be understood from what is going to happen in the future, because leadership is not just independent of a projection of the future, because a leader is expected to provide an insight and foresight as to what is going to happen and how they are to be taken care of. So that's why I am giving the potential scenario post COVID, and I will come to your point, because that is the most fundamental point. But the point is, I don't believe in that leadership can be done without getting any idea or foresight about what's going to happen in the future. We cannot provide a leadership, and that has been proved time and again, in the context of the global situation that we have been observing for the last, say, 50 or 60 years, because our leadership in many cases could not foresee as to what's going to happen in the future, and the efforts were taken as knee-jerk level, and we took some impromptu decisions and went on. But the point is that I am trying to make is that there is going to be a huge rise in unemployment. There is an impending debt crisis, and G20 countries, and one of the leaders being India, has agreed to provide debt service suspension for the poorest countries. This is also going to have an increasing intra-country inequality. And United Deputy Secretary General on May 3rd said that we are exposing the frailties and inequalities of our society. More than 40 to 60 million people, as per the estimation by UN, are being pushed into extreme poverty, and there is a tremendous base erosion of national health systems and their global repercussions, because this is the first time maybe during the last 100 years we have realized that the health profile of an individual is no longer independent of that of others in case of a pandemic. My health profile earlier, when we were talking in terms of more private investment in health sector, we were happy with the belief that my health profile is only dependent on what I can afford. But now it has come to our realization that it is no longer independent of that of others. Even someone getting infected can infect me. And along with that, as you were rightly saying in the beginning of the discussion, that we are experiencing a severe stress on existing political and social systems. They are also a result of the pandemic. The pandemic has also contributed to these stress in political and social systems in terms of racism, in terms of household violence, in terms of threats of war, in terms of increased trustlessness and weakening of the global institutions. So we are in a situation where we are not just facing a one-pronged problem and we can find out a solution to just solving the problem of the pandemic. There are some related problems as well. And if we talk about the future, the leadership has to take care of all these components and all these threats that are looming large on the human life in the world today. So I believe Professor Pandey will be happy now with this slide.
Sure, Professor. Professor, with your permission, I would like to ask few questions. Can I?
Let me finish. I have just left with just 3-4 slides, and
Sure.
then we can ask questions.
Yeah. Why I'm interrupting you, because it's quite interesting, and I have a lot of questions in my mind, but I have to go for a PhD Viva around 12 o'clock. So that's why I interrupted you.
Just two
Oh,
slides, 2-3 slides, and then I will give you, because
okay, Professor.
I think this is the most fundamental slide that
Sure,
I
sure,
wanted
sure.
to share with you.
Please continue.
So, what is the future? What should we do? Perhaps the realization has dawned in within the global community, India included, and which is being argued by our Prime Minister repeatedly, that the time has come for all of us to move away from competitive globalization to cooperative globalism. I would like to distinguish between these two terms. The whole idea of globalization was based fundamentally on a situation, although even though we talk in terms of the whole world as a a global village, but ultimately the interactions across the communities were very highly constrained by the ideas within the national boundaries. The national interest played more important role in taking the decisions towards globalization, and that was mostly based on the fundamental ideas that competition breeds efficiency, and if we are globally competitive, then we can help each other. The whole concept of global value chain and all these things was nothing but breaking up of competitive capacities across the states, across the countries. But now people have started arguing, which our Prime Minister also referred to several times, that perhaps on some issues we have to throw away our passports and think ourselves as global citizens, as Homo sapiens, as he said, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So the idea is that we have to, at some levels, behave like a human being, not as an Indian or a Sri Lankan. I am making these two terms because I found there is one of us who is from Sri Lanka. So I am just trying to refer it. I have no specific intention of mentioning that name of that country. It can be any other country. So we have to move away from competitive globalization to cooperative globalism. And the argument by Mr. Modi in terms of trying to develop a SARC pandemic fund is a direction, is a move in that direction, that we think not in terms of the citizen of a country, but in terms of the people of the whole world. The second requirement is creation of more global public goods through global public investment for equality and sustainability. If you have a look at the SDGs look forward to creation of a number of global public goods and number of global commons, which can help not just people of one country, but will help in inclusive growth. The third one is strengthening of multilateral institutions as a mechanism to ensure inclusive development, quite evidently expressed by the Foreign Minister of India in United Nations, while India was asking for support from the global community to become a temporary member of the Security Council. So the whole idea of India's approach in providing leadership, and the fact that more than 180 out of 190 countries voted for India is a clear indicator of India's emerging leadership in the global system and global multilateral institutions. And that is what that we have to shift from competitive globalization to cooperative globalism. And we have to also create a horizontal, non-hierarchical network for knowledge sharing, which India has been at the forefront along with several other partners across the globe about sharing. And it is not just India. Even I was a few days back, I was a part of an webinar with colleagues from Rwanda, Korea, and China. Even countries like Rwanda are sharing their knowledge with other countries. Countries like Cuba are sharing their knowledge with other countries. So horizontal vertical network for knowledge sharing is required. There is very important, this is very important from the perspective that unlike financial resources, knowledge is not confined to any particular set of countries. Every country each country has their own set of knowledge, and those sets of knowledge can be useful for use by people from any other country. Well, now you may, Professor Pandey, you may raise your questions. I can answer, and then I'll go to some specific issues which India is thinking and which we have been working with OECD to initiate in the case of health infrastructure. You are not audible. You are not audible.
Now, am I audible, Professor?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was reading something and I thought that there was some question in my mind, so I thought that I'll discuss with you. What I believe that any post-pandemic world, it's an order that emerges regardless of whether it is US centric or China centric. There is no scenario in which India inverts it, which is inverts in itself, and home of 1/6 of the humanity will not occupy a place. The question is this: that will we emerge as a part of the problem or a part of the solution? Will we emerge weaker or stronger as a nation? Will we have been guided by devised political agendas that deepen our fault line, or we will have worked towards an inclusive India that embraces all of us in its fold, regardless caste, class, and creed? What is your view, Professor?
Well, this is an issue that I thought I won't cover in this presentation because it was mostly in the context of the title itself said post-COVID, so I emphasized more on the issue, the situation relating to COVID. But if you want to expand the idea, what I would say that if you follow the theories of international relations, uh, there are two very important components which are said to influence the relationship across countries. One is called the hard power and the other is called the soft power. And for quite a long time, India followed a doctrine of using its soft power in terms of its interactions with most of the southern countries to create a coalition of the developing world in trying to generate some sort of collective power in the world system. And for last few years, there is a tendency of India veering a little away from just using the soft power, but also trying to use some amount of hard power as well. But the fact is, even though we are capable of showing some amount of hard power here and there, our strength lies mostly in terms of using our soft power. And that is what was quite clear during the last election to the Security Council temporary membership as well. And India emerged as one of the consensus candidates, with most of the countries voting in favor of India, not because of a huge hard power being enjoyed by India in the global scenario. It enjoys a goodwill, it enjoys a sort of a position in the global system as a forebearer of peace, as a forebearer of helping others to prosperity, and that is what I think is the most important international power that India wields, and India has to play an important role in moving forward with this perspective.
Thank
And
you, Professor.
in that context, I would also like to reiterate that if you have a look at the arguments emerging out of the members of the OECD countries on the one hand and some other countries on the other, you will find that they have also started towing some of the arguments articulated by the Indian leadership in the global platform.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. Any question, others? And any guest?
No, no, I have yet to finish.
Please complete.
I just wanted to give you the time to, since you said you would be
Please.
living at the strike of the
Well,
stroke of the
yeah.
noon. So I just gave you that.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let me go to the next slide. How India is thinking and how India is arguing with different organizations at different levels, at different platforms to make health services a global public good. There are three ideas that are being floated, and this is what I wrote. OECD just recently it came out. We argued that there can be three specific targeted methods to be introduced immediately. The first one has been also proposed by India in G20 meeting, creation of a pandemic insurance fund, a sort of a contribution-based pandemic insurance fund which will take care of any such eventualities in the future, which can take care of the uncertainties in health profiles, which can take care of the uncertainties of the capacity of creation of wealth, and that pandemic insurance fund can be managed by the contributing countries. They can contribute to this fund and they can be managed so that in case of, God forbid, in case of the next pandemic, these sort of funds can be used right from the beginning as an insurance cover for the generations. The second point, which is coming out of the SDG on health, SDG is looking for health for all in 2030. Against that backdrop, perhaps there is a huge realization across the globe that we should identify a benchmark global standard of health infrastructure, and every country should be geared to develop a benchmark global health infrastructure standard in their own countries, and for that a global investment fund for can be created in the like what we have done, what has been already done in the name of Gavi, the Alliance for Vaccine, Global Vaccine Alliance. So some sort of an investment fund which will involve investment by the pension funds, by the sovereign funds, and so that we identify a benchmark standard and help invest in all the countries across the globe to ensure that that minimum fundamental accepted global standard is achieved in terms of health infrastructure. The health infrastructure may include the soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure as well. Hospital beds, medical devices, medical personnel, and so on and so forth. And the third one is developing an environment of IPR-free R&D network for developing medicines, vaccines, and medical devices. We are seeing a lot of race against time by many private enterprises in developing vaccines. And given the IPR regime, we don't know what will be the cost of the vaccines and whether they will be prohibitively costly to help people from lower means to avail the facilities of those vaccines. In the case of health and health-related services, we have to ensure that